is the Big 12 in crisis? We've been working on a college football Super League story on this show for several weeks now. After the Greg Sankey podcast, we're not lowering ourselves to the dirty, unwashed comment that we played on this show, and this narrative now that the SEC is not interested in a Super League. We've been working on that, and we have been talking to sources throughout college football, and we have learned that the Big 12 is heavily divided about whether or not they should be trying to push for a college football Super League. There is a perception versus reality issue in the Big 12, and it is undeniable. Most of the Big 12 believes that they belong in the Power 5 conversation. At this point, it's Power 4 conversation, that they belong competing at the upper echelons, the top of the college football world. However, there is a small factions, as many as 5 teams in the Big 12, who do not believe that they belong competing with the Big 10 and the SEC, who want to take that narrative and run with it and build a business model that suits them as what they believe to be is a smaller conference. That is a huge argument in the Big 12. Yesterday, Pete Thamel reported that the president at Baylor, who we're going to talk about in a minute, sent a letter to all power conference administrators inviting them to a meeting in early December with the organizers and the potential leadership, the money behind a college football Super League, but that most members of the SEC, the Big 10, and to some surprise, several members of the Big 12 declined that invitation to go to that presentation in early December to see what the details of a college football Super League could be about. I am told that there have been at times heated discussions in the Big 12 amongst its leadership about where they are and who they are in college football, and do they belong in a position of generating or pushing interest, conversation, being the conference that leads the line to the formation of a college football Super League. There is a large swath of universities in the Big 12 who believe they should be doing that. The problem is there is a vocal minority who want nothing to do with it. Jake, I think this is the first time we have seen real division under Brett Yormark's leadership of the Big 12.
Certainly. And I think that, things like the Super League and like power relationships tend to do that to people. I think, this concept of the SEC doesn't want to lower itself to the great unwashed, if you will, I think is asking for division at the power level. And I think, the Big 12 and the ACC are kind of in this situation where you're essentially just along for the ride. I mean, we've talked all week about how, right now in the college football playoff rankings, as an example, the Big 10 and the SEC are dominating those. And, the Big 12 is going to be lucky to get, one team in your conference champion, and that's it. Whereas the Big 10 and the SEC are filling that thing up all the way to the brim. So it's this situation where the SEC doesn't have a need to work with the Big 12 or the ACC. The SEC is partnered with the Big 10 to create a mutually beneficial partnership. And now folks in the Big 12 are trying to figure out what they're going to do about it, if anything. And that's where the division is based out of. Some people in the Big 12, some administrators in the Big 12 want to do something about it. Other administrators in the Big 12 very clearly are not interested in even having the conversation or looking at options. And I'm guessing the question of, hey, if the SEC and the Big 10 go off and do their own thing, we could run what's left. You can't tell me people aren't considering that option. Like that has to be something people are at least talking about. And so that's why I say, like, division in the Big 12. Yes, we haven't really seen that under Brett Yormark, but I do think stuff like this makes it much easier for people to disagree when they sit in boardrooms and try to figure out what they're going to do about stuff.
Well, I can also tell you that sources close to that situation told me straight up, one of the conversations and one of the big disagreements in the Big 12 right now is, are you better off without Texas and Oklahoma? And there is a large swath in the Big 12 that believe they are better off politically and as an entirety, as a group, when it comes to communication, when it comes to initiatives, when it comes to business decisions, practical decisions to move the conference forward. they are fairly aligned on the fact that they are better off without the politics of Texas and Oklahoma, which seemingly always got in the way. But there is a significant fissure, divide, difference of opinion, I was told by multiple sources in the conference yesterday, about whether or not as a football conference they are better off without Texas and Oklahoma. And if you can believe it, because it is a shocking position in my belief, it is a shocking position for administrators who are charged with the betterment of this conference and their universities to move forward with a business plan where they have in mind that they are a better football entity without Texas and Oklahoma. That is a heated conversation at times in this league. And I just don't know how you come off that as a unified group. If you're an administrator in the Big 12, and I talked to one yesterday, an athletic director who was shocked, absolutely shocked at the idea that this league is in a better position and more stable without Texas and Oklahoma. I have real fear that this league will move together in a unified fashion for the College Football Super League. And I will tell you, I am not ready to name names, but there are 4 prominent brands in the Big 12 that want absolutely nothing to do with the College Football Super League. Their belief is that they should take what is left of the 2 conferences, the ACC and the Big 12, and form their own entity to compete with the Big 10 and the SEC. And I think it is absolute heresy. I think it is an absolute dereliction of duty to believe that the Big 12 and the ACC, as they are constituted, can compete against the Big 10 and the SEC. I think it's a ridiculous notion. I think it is absolutely malpractice to go and compete against the Big 10 and the SEC. Now, thankfully, the large majority of administrators in this league, and I can tell you every Big 12 university in Texas is behind what the Baylor president did yesterday. And let me put up Pete Thamel's tweet, because I think this is a big part of this. Big 12 board chair Linda Livingstone sent a letter to college presidents and chancellors, all of them, calling for an urgent need for presidents and chancellors from the ACC, the Big 12, the Big 10, and the SEC to gather in person to discuss, quote, models for future college football, specifically college and athletics overall. I am told that that invitation was for 2 dates, December 2nd or December 7th, and they would listen to presentations on the College Football Super League, to which everybody in the SEC said no, and just about everybody in the Big 10 declined. And I am told 4 members of the Big 12 declined that invitation.
Mm-hmm.
We'll see who winds up showing up. We'll see who's there. I do believe that you will get members from every conference that will show up and listen in this conversation. But you better understand one thing. The Big 10 and the SEC are in lockstep. And when I say that, the leadership of the Big 10 and the SEC are in lockstep. That does not mean that every chancellor and president in the Big 10 and the SEC said no. What that means is that athletic directors in those 2 conferences are talking to Tony Petitti and Greg Sankey about this meeting. And they fell in line behind Tony Petitti and Greg Sankey. I don't believe that most of them will show up to this presentation.
Why would they?
I think Greg Sankey is acutely aware that a college football super league probably costs his memberships money when it comes to football. I think he is aware of that, because there's no way that it doesn't.
Mm-hmm.
Right now, and again, I just go back to this right here. I go back to the rankings in the college football playoff. And you look at how many Big 10 and SEC universities are dominating that top 12. Oregon, Ohio State, Georgia, Texas, Penn State, Tennessee, Indiana, Alabama, and Notre Dame. It's not in question anymore whether or not the Big 10 and the SEC control college football. Oh, they absolutely do. The question is, what is the Big 12 and the ACC going to do about it? I think that's the entirety of this conversation.
Yeah, and I think that this whole situation, as far as Livingstone is concerned, and sending this letter and like this type of behavior, has hitting the panic button written all over it. I mean, it reeks of, hey, we we heard the comments on the podcast by Sankey. We then see the rankings and understand that, we have one team in, and we also understand, and again, I don't say this out of any hate for any individual school in the Big 12, but your school that's way underachieving this year and way underperforming is a massive problem for the conference. And, whether it's, again, Oklahoma State or Kansas or whoever you want to look at, there's got to be accountability on that front. And I think that that's part of the issue for the Big 12 and the ACC, because they both have that problem. And the Big 10 and the SEC clearly don't have that problem. And, that's the issue. And, to compound that, and this is what I think leads to the crisis portion of the conversation for the Big 12. The SEC and the Big 10 are chilling. They're in lockstep. They're just walking down the yellow brick road, playing their football games, making their money, doing their thing. And the Big 12 is sitting here like, yeah, dude, we got to do something, because we know that BYU is not going to be 9-0 every year, and we know that most of our schools are not going to go undefeated most years. And if we don't go undefeated and we don't have multiple, options for the college football playoff, that's going to be a problem. So now we got to have a conversation about what's the future of our conference and what direction are we heading, because I have to say, it does make a lot of sense to me to let the SEC and the Big 10 go and do their thing, and then recreate something new. This is what I've been saying about the G5 for, a year now, man. Like, I've been saying for how long that the G5 at some point is going to have to create its own system. Stop comparing yourself to the SEC and the Big 10. You're not them. You're never going to be.
Well, I also think that Greg Sankey understands that the Big 10 and the SEC are weaker without the ACC and the Big 12. I mean, we can sit here and have conversation about the influence and where they're the best teams lie. There's no argument. They're in the SEC and the Big 10. There's no question about that. If the Pac-12 had not melted down, this is a completely different conversation. 100% a different conversation, because the Big 12 wouldn't be in existence right now if the Pac-12 hadn't melted down. But they did, and the Big 12 is in existence. And I think this is where the state of Texas has to stand forward and lead, because I also think that Oklahoma State does not seem to have an appetite to lead. Oklahoma State does not seem to want to step forward and make their position known in this conference. And I think that is very interesting, because I think, again, and maybe the people I talk to are just wrong. I think people I talk to in this conference believe that Oklahoma State is a pivotal, vital. You have to have them in a leadership position. And I agree, simply because they have one of the bigger brands in the conference.
Mm-hmm.
They might be the only brand in the conference, because right now, you look at the state of Texas, every university in this conference in the state of Texas is struggling. And I think it is no coincidence that Baylor's president is the one leading the line on this. One, obviously, as Mr. Thamel, Pete Thamel, said, she's the Big 12 chairman at this point. So when you look at what Linda Livingstone represents, she is one of the leaders of this conference. But I also think when you look at Texas Tech and you look at TCU and to a lesser extent Houston, because they're new to this conference, Oklahoma State needs to lead. Oklahoma State needs to have a very strong voice in this decision-making process, because we can sit here and we can play this game, but I'm sounding the alarm today on the Big 12 and the ACC. You better do something other than nothing, or you will not be here. You will not be at the top of college football. Your seat at the table is tenuous at best. Because what is everybody saying about the college football playoff? Well, let's see what happens the next 2 years. Do you think it's a coincidence that these conversations have been happening over the last 2-3 weeks? It's not a coincidence. And why is it not a coincidence? Because the football in the Big 12 is not good right now.
Yeah.
It is not good. You're going to get, the stark reality is you're going to get one team into the college football playoff. One, that's it. And again, with all due respect to my friends in Provo and BYU, if it's BYU and that's it, you're in real trouble in this conference, because BYU's brand is not big. BYU football, if you're a businessman, if you are marketing and if you are selling, do you want BYU football in over Oak State football, over Texas Tech football, over TCU football? You don't. You don't, because you can make more money on universities that have a brand. And when I say have a brand, BYU has a brand. BYU has a national championship. BYU has high draft picks. BYU has Hall of Famers. They're new to this league. And it's an indictment that Oak State, Baylor, Tech, TCU are struggling this much. It's an indictment.
Yes.
It is not. This is what I've talked about all year long. This league needed Oak State and Utah to be dominant football programs this year, and both of them have been absolute failures.
Yeah, I mean, I don't hesitate to say it's one of the most embarrassing seasons for both of those programs in recent memory. And everyone wants to ride us about the fact that we thought Utah would win the conference, but what you're not saying is nobody thought Utah would be this bad. And I don't know. I don't know what it's going to take. Like, I do find it rich that, that leadership at Baylor is leading this conversation. Like it's surprising to me. And I understand she's chair of the board. Totally get it. I understand that. But look at the Pac-12 and Scott Barnes. Like, Scott Barnes isn't the commissioner of the Pac-12, but what is he? He's an athletic director at one of the most influential schools in the conference currently, in the future conference, I should say. So you would think that leadership at, Oklahoma State, let's say, or any of those schools you just mentioned would be the ones leading the line on this. But I do feel like the Big 12 really struggles with this concept of like, hey, this is how we've always done it, so this is how we're going to do it. And even if the Big 10 and the SEC are walking away with Brinks trucks worth of money, and we don't have access to that, we don't care. We're just going to do it how we've always done it. And I do think the Big 12 suffers from that massively, man. Like, I think the idea that people are wondering if the conference is better off without Texas from a football standpoint is crazy to me. I understand that there's business dealings and there's a lot that goes into that conversation. Totally get it. But it's damn near impossible to backfill brands like that. It's really, really difficult. So to me, I just look at this and I say, like, at some point, like, it can't just be on Brett Yormark and the commissioner's office to push the Big 12 forward. The member institutions in the conference at some point are going to have to come to the table. They're going to have to say, yeah, you know what, this is probably a conversation we're not real interested in having. It's uncomfortable for us. Like, maybe, it's just not something we want to put effort into right now. But the reality is we don't have a choice. We have to do this. We have to move forward. We have to figure out what's next so that the future of our conference is secure. And yeah. I really struggle with the idea that folks in Oklahoma State land or whoever are just not it. Like, maybe it's harsh to say they're not taking it seriously, but it just doesn't seem like there's that sense of urgency with it.
There is a faction in this conference who think that it's going to happen for them. And I think that is terrifying. And I think you look at the Four Corner schools that are coming out of a disastrous conference meltdown. I can tell you right now, those are not the four schools hoping that things happen for them. I can tell you that right now. And yeah, I mean, you can do some simple math.
Yeah.
The Texas schools are leading this. The Four Corner schools are on board with it. You go and figure it out. I'm not ready to name names here because I haven't been able to confirm that. But if you're going to do business the way you've always done business, you're going to get the same result.
And the scary thing is the SEC and the Big Ten are not doing business the way they've always done.
Very much not. And I think when you look at the Super League and what the biggest hurdles are, it has nothing to do with finances. You're going to have a massive influx of private equity. You're going to have a massive influx because I've also, as I've told you this week, I've been talking to TV sources. I pretty much talk to them all the time. I have a lot of friends in television. ESPN and Fox, CBS, NBC, they're on board with the Super League. They are on board with the Super League. The problem is that college football's house is not in order. And this NIL settlement has been so poorly handled for so many years. And again, I'll keep going back to this. Greg Sankey continued to beat the drum. We need to change this. We need to change this. We need to change this. And what did everybody say? No, it'll work out. It'll handle itself. It'll be fine. And then you wound up in an antitrust lawsuit where your antitrust exemption was being challenged in court, and it cost you billions. So what did Greg Sankey do? Greg Sankey pretty much said, I'm not going to work with you guys anymore. And who do you think, when I say you guys, who do you think that is? The Big 12 and the ACC and the old Pac-12. And because they were all sitting around a table not taking action.
Yeah, I was going to say, what do those three conferences have in common? And the ACC most recently is the one you have to look at, but those conferences all share this behavior of, bad business or not being aggressive with securing your future and securing revenue generating activities at the conference level.
But it's more than that, in my opinion. And I'm not saying you're wrong.
Yeah.
It's a sense of entitlement that you deserve some of what the SEC and the Big Ten have. And I'm just going to play the Greg Sankey clip again, because I think, and I know that everybody hates Greg Sankey. I don't. I respect the guy. And if I were a college football administrator, I'd want this dude leading my conference.
I don't want to dumb down the Southeastern Conference to be part of some Super League notion with 70 teams that some people speculate would happen. They want to be us, and that's on them to figure it out, not on me to bring myself back to earth.
So what was the initial reaction to that clip? Oh, well, he's arrogant. He's an a-hole. He's all these terrible names. And
he doesn't care about anybody but the SEC.
Yeah, he's selfish.
Who's he supposed to care about?
Yeah, well, the problem is what I was going to say is I don't even prefer to phrase it that way. I more think of it as, hey, like, you haven't given him a choice. Like, you did bad business, and you have that sort of sense of entitlement, if you will, like you were talking about. And so Greg Sankey's sitting there like, yeah, we're the best conference. We're able to absorb the cost of this NIL settlement, at least. But we need to get back in a power position financially with the NIL thing in that picture, and we have to figure that out. And I'm not going to sit around and wait for folks on the East Coast or folks in the Big 12 to get their want to together, to get their desire together. We're going to go out and we're just going to do this, and it's on them to figure it out.
Exactly right.
And so I have a really hard time blaming Greg Sankey for that when we're in a time in college football when it seems like everybody and their mom is coming after their pocketbook. And it bothers me that and I've been saying this for years. I don't understand why brands in conferences, whether it was the old Pac-12 or now the Big 12 in current day, or even the ACC, they don't take winning football games seriously enough, and then they want to complain when they get left out of the picture.
And if BYU goes to the college football playoff, and I think if BYU goes to the college football playoff, win or lose, especially if they go as your conference champion, they're now the biggest brand in the conference.
Yeah.
They instantly become the biggest brand in the conference. And if that is not shocking to you, this is, I hope that people understand. Do you understand the challenges that it is to win football games? Just win a football game at BYU on a daily basis compared to every other team in this conference. Do you really think in anybody's existence at BYU that your best player would get a DUI and the coach would say, well, that's okay, I've gotten DUIs too, or I've driven drunk too? Do you understand how many heads would roll for that at BYU? Jamal Williams left the program for a year because he got a ticket for possessing alcohol by consuming it. He left the program for a year at BYU. Jamal Williams, the NFL running back, got a ticket for possession of alcohol by consumption, which means you drank. That means you're possessing alcohol in your body. Here's a ticket for that. Do you understand you're recruiting? And I don't say this as a knock on BYU. I have a mad amount of respect for my friends in Provo. Do you understand how difficult it is to go sit in a living room and tell the best quarterback in the country, yeah, we want you to come play quarterback at BYU, but You can't have women in your dorm room. You certainly can't have sex with women in your dorm room. And really, let me be clear. Let me clarify that. You can't have sex at all for the next 4 years. Unless you get married, then you can have as much sex as you want.
But we'll put you in the league, Jake. We'll put you in the league.
And they still go and get a guy like Jake Retzloff, who was the number 1 JUCO quarterback in the country.
So again, it comes down to, a lack of, like, there may not be a better example of this point than the fact that Oklahoma State couldn't get to the college football playoff because Texas was standing in their way every year. Texas leads the conference. Oklahoma State craps the bed. How does that happen?
And I just want to ask, where is Deion in Colorado in this conversation? Because I'll be honest with you and I will say, if you think that Rick George and Deion Sanders don't want a Super League, you're out of your mind. You're not paying attention. Because Deion Sanders will continue to tell you, we're going to do everything we could do to win every football game and take the biggest prizes possible.
And again, what was the reaction of Deion? Similar sentiment to Greg Sankey.
We don't want him here. This guy's a jerk. What do you mean it's Louis? God, how could you do that to these kids?
Everyone.
He's arrogant. How could you do that to these kids? Now what? I say all this not to be an a-hole or a red ass. I truly don't mean to come off that way. You've got to get out of this old world thinking.
Yeah, I mean, we got to have this uncomfortable conversation now because of where you're at based on your behavior. I didn't roll up to the program today and I was like, man, I'm really excited to talk about the fact that the Big 12 is underachieving in basically every category. You think that excites us?
Do you understand that you have people in this league who think they're better off without Oklahoma and Texas? Let that sink in. And when you ask yourself, is this league one of the best football leagues in the country? It is. Are they better off without Texas and Oklahoma? There's not a chance in the world they are. And I'm not telling you this. And again, trust me, bro, source. Okay, great. An athletic director in the Big 12 is who is telling us that. An athletic director in the Big 12 says some of his constituents in the conference believe they're better off without Texas and Oklahoma.
How?
Somebody make it make sense.
Yeah.
And the reason I'm so passionate about this today is because this league, for the first time, Brett Yormark, I was also told by sources, Brett Yormark has preached calm, clear, professional communication.
Yeah.
That's not what we're getting out of the Big 12. When you send a letter to every Power 5, P4, excuse me, every power administrator, and a good chunk of them turn you down.
But I mean, look at the verbiage. You're using words like urgent and I'm telling you, this has panic button written all over it. An urgent need to meet. Oh, so you need to meet urgently because you now somehow see the writing on the wall, which I think is the other piece of this conversation that nobody's going to talk about. And it's just assumed that people are going to read between the lines and understand this. Bro, you're just now sending this letter. Where have you been for 3 years? Like, did you not recognize when it was basically 3 SEC teams and a Big 10 team in the 4-team college football playoff, that this was a natural progression that was going to take place? Was there not any type of understanding or desire to have a conversation about the fact that, yeah, man, going to be really tough for the Big 12 or the ACC to get into a 4-team playoff, right? Okay, let's expand it. Okay, we'll expand it, but the SEC and the Big 10 are, they're going to push to have 3 AQs apiece at some point. That's going to happen. With all due respect to Linda, I don't feel like you've been paying attention if right now you're recognizing the need to meet. With all due respect.
Because the Big 10 and the SEC will not be in Dallas on December 2nd. They won't. I think that's the date. Or at least I was told the date is December 2nd in Dallas.
Hotel, bro.
They will not be. I do not believe there will be a single. From what I was told yesterday, there will not be a single Big 10 or SEC administrator there.
And if they
I don't believe that there will be.
If they were to show up, would that be considered disrespectful to leadership in the Big Ten and the SEC if you were to humor this idea?
Yeah, I believe they would be viewed as a pariah.
So my point is,
and you can't do that.
You can't do that. You can't like this. So when we were like, hey, like, what do you mean the Big 12 is in crisis? Well, what we mean is that the leadership and the personnel in the SEC and the Big Ten are all on the same page and all saying, hey, yeah, we're not going to go to this little picnic over here with the Big 12 and the ACC because we're already down the road. We've had this meeting. We're way down the road already. We can't humor this.
They are, and I can't. The reason that I'm hitting the panic button today is singularly because the Big Ten and the SEC essentially said, somebody hit this fly, get a fly swatter, get it out of here.
Get the hell out of here, man.
They're not coming to this meeting because they're already well down the path to their own business model, to their own plan, which is, I'm told, private equity and excluding anybody on their football schedules that are not the Big Ten and the SEC.
To which I say, for the Big 12 and the ACC, I'd say, great, go ahead and do it. Go do it. Go do your own thing, because we're going to run what's left, because there's more of us, and there's more of us than there are of you.
And I think that's a losing proposition.
Well,
I think Greg Sankey knows it. They could have, I reported on this show now what everybody is reporting, that the Big Ten and the SEC chose not to lock their schedule. They chose not to at that last meeting they had. What was that, in August or September or something like that? They chose not to. It was openly discussed in those meetings. Should we play anybody that is not in this room? And the universal answer was yes, but not yet. That was the answer.
So not going to lock the schedule, but at some point.
But it's going to happen.
Yeah.
And I think it's because they don't have their branding and finances in order to do that yet. And I think they know the minute they lock their schedule, it is a civil war in college football.
But aren't we already there? Aren't we already in a place where these two are butting heads?
I think so. The problem is that, and what's the right way to say this? Notre Dame laid down.
Mm-hmm.
So I go back to this Notre Dame conversation and why I am so pissed at Jack Swarbrick, the outgoing athletic director at Notre Dame. Jack Swarbrick convinced leadership at Notre Dame that the right thing to do was to take a guaranteed spot versus joining a conference and competing. Now, on its face, you're like, well, hey, Monty. No, hey, Monty. I get that makes sense. But that's the easy button, because what did he do? He gave up all of Notre Dame's influence and power over the process in the decision-making of the future of college football. When they said, okay, here, give us, if we're ranked in the top 12 teams in the country, we're automatically in the college football playoff. Sure. Okay, here's all of our influence. Take it. Because now, essentially what happens is Notre Dame doesn't have a voice. Their vote goes wherever Greg Sankey tells them to. Their influence goes wherever Greg Sankey tells them to. Are they aligned with the SEC? All their other sports are in the SEC. Oh, wait, they're in the ACC for everything else. So now, who really is Notre Dame aligned with? The ACC? No. They're aligned with the SEC because that's what's good for football. And whatever is good for football is what's good for Notre Dame.
Oh, you mean whatever pays the bills?
Because they're not a basketball juggernaut. Haven't been relevant in basketball for some years. And I will just continue to tell you, when you are not a football program, and this is what we talked about with Boise State, when you don't have a basketball program and everything is in football, at some point, you have to make significant moves. I don't know, like leaving the Mountain West and going to the Pac-12 for a promised payout, because you're not making the money you need to make in basketball to support all of your other athletics. And it's why Brett Yormark, as I've said on this show, I think is a business genius of college athletics, because he's built a model that is not reliant on football revenue to pay for everything.
Mm-hmm.
They have enough tournament shares and will continue into the future to have enough tournament shares to power this conference. And now the question is, who shows up in Dallas on December 2nd? I think that is the single biggest question, because I could tell you, I think every member of the Big 12, whether they want to be there or not, if it takes a tow truck and a Huey helicopter to get them there, they're going to be drugged there. Everybody in this league will be at that meeting December 2nd. My question is, if the Big 10 and the SEC send nobody, and you have everybody in the ACC and everybody in the Big 12, what's the unintended consequences? Because that's what both sides of this. Do you burn any bridge in any relationship you have? Because I'll also go back to what I reaffirmed yesterday. All of these commissioners meet once a week. They talk. They have a scheduled call once a week.
So
all of them. They're constantly in communication.
So then why is, see, and this is my problem, because that is the case. Why are we sending out urgent letters? Why are we like positioning the Big 12 and the ACC in a way where it's like, oh man, panic button time? Like it just, maybe I make too much of it, but when I saw this, I was like, hold on a second. Like, we know these people talk. We know that the commissioners talk and, leadership talk. Like, that's how it works. So you're sending out an urgent letter to all the leaders. Like, who the hell are you?
And again,
with all due respect, like,
and you guys all called me crazy when I said this. I want to go back and I want to play this Sankey bite from whatever, the Triple Option podcast. Listen, in here, does he say, I'm never doing a Super League or the Super League's dead? No. Listen to what he says about a Super League.
I don't want to dumb down the Southeastern Conference to be part of some Super League notion with 70 teams that some people speculate would happen.
Some notion of a 70 league team. And I'll go back to what I've said. What do I think is going to happen? I think you're going to have multiple. I think it is a dozen minimum universities at the power level who are like, yeah, I don't want to pay that money. I'm not going to compete in a super conference. So does he have to worry about 70 teams?
Nope.
What is Greg Sankey saying in that bite that you all told me I was crazy for? I think you're going to see, it's like Urban Meyer in his roster, Dion in his roster. We're going to lop off the bottom 25% of you guys.
Which y'all vilified him for.
And we're going to all move on with our life. I think what's going to happen is you are going to see the teams in the Big 12. Those 4 teams in the Big 12 who don't want to be part of the Super League, they won't be part of the Super League. They won't. And everybody else in this league, the other 12, I think will move into a Super League. And I think members of the ACC who don't want to, you're telling me that the Virginia schools, you're telling me they want to pony up $500 million minimum on top of the $500 million they're already ponying up? Because I think that's what it's going to take. Now, you're also probably each going to get hundreds of millions of dollars in private equity. So that'll be offset some. But I'm telling you right now, there's going to be the bottom 25% of these power conferences will not be in the College Football Super League. Because I agree. I don't believe. I agree with Greg Sankey. It won't be 70 teams.
No.
I think you're looking at 64, maybe. If you get 12 out of the Big 12, the top 12 football programs in this conference, and again, you lose.
How are we characterizing top teams, right? Because that's the hard part, is like,
who's making money and who's not.
Right. But not just over time. At the time of the decision, who's able to say, hey, yeah, we have money sitting here to be able to make this happen.
Trajectory are we on?
Yeah.
And can we, the SMU model, can we buy our way into something?
Which is looking pretty nice right now.
For all of us, including me, who mocked SMU for buying their way into the ACC.
Bad look to do what you did. Now it's looking nice.
But my point is, I don't think it's going to be 70 teams. And I will again say, Greg Sankey at no time has ever said the Super League is dead. I'm not doing it. No, 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 no. He just he consistently has chosen his words very carefully. And I think you're going to see, if you're not Louis, you're going to get chopped.
Do you believe?
And I think there's a lot of people in the SEC, in the ACC, in the Big 12. I think fewer members in the Big 10 because they are all very well heeled. I think there's very few members who want to opt out in the Big 10. But I think, I know that there are 4 teams in the Big 12 who don't want to be in a Super League. I know that there are teams in the Big 12, I've been told repeatedly, who have contemplated opted out of revenue sharing. Straightforward in football. Don't want a revenue share. Don't want to pay that kind of money. Don't want to have that kind of infrastructure. I know that that's happening in this league,
which is just disappointing.
I know the bottom of the ACC has talked about this. I am very confident, in my opinion, in the people I talk to. I think there are at least a dozen who do not want anything to do with a Super League.